Hi. Writing clients that interface with the RESTful interface on the CA is quite straightforward, particularly in Java because of the RESTful Client Proxy framework. We've created some client classes to help that integration be even easier. We're looking here at one of these classes, which is the CA client.java, which is code in the client library. An application writer would simply instantiate a CA client class and then would call methods on this object to interact with the CA. Some of these methods, for example, includes list requests, list search, list profiles, get profile, that kind of thing. So in one way of instantiating this object is to pass in a client config object. A client config object is simply a bean that contains all the information you need to connect to a CA. It has, for example, variables for the server URI, as well as the certificate database, where you have a client cert stored that you use for authentication, the nickname of that cert, and the password for the database. It also has fields for a username and password in the event that you would like to connect using username and password authentication. Some operations require that, and some operations do not. Once you have passed in your client config, a new PKI client object will handle all of the logic required to make the connection to the CA and do the authentication. Now you'll notice that during the initialization we create proxies, client proxies, of the three different resources: the cert resource, the cert request resource, and the profile resource. And these, in fact, are the objects that are shared between the server and the client. And so if we look at these objects, and one of these objects, for example, you'll notice that there are a bunch of methods that have annotations, JAX-RS annotations. So, for example, and these annotations are the ones that are used by the client framework in order to turn a method call into an HTTP request. So, for example, if we were to call get request info ID, this in turn would turn this into a get request, HTTP get request, to the path cert requests ID, and would expect to receive back a cert request info object or a representation thereof, either in XML or JSON. Cert request info, in fact, itself is simply a class. It's another bean class that has annotations, JAXB annotations, which tells the client, and both the client and the server, how to unpack that, how to both serialize and deserialize that object into either XML or JSON. So how do we use a CA client? Well, there are a couple of examples. In catest.java, we have client code, which shows you how to initialize a token for a database, and then use that to create a client config object, which in turn is used to instantiate a CA client. And then you can use the CA client to do things like list certs, gets information about certs, request certs, and so on. In particular, this code has some logic in there that shows you how to create the data objects which are required in some of the requests and so on. In addition, the PKI command line utility, which has just been created, uses the CA client and other clients like this extensively, so you can see how we use the code in order to interface with the CA and the KRA. All in all, it's very easy and very straightforward because you're basically making method calls rather than trying to handcraft HTTP requests or do any kind of serialization or deserialization. And that makes it quite easy and quite fun. Thank you.